Spider-Man has a problem that nobody talks about. Spider-Man 4, I guess, is the upcoming Spider-Man that's going on, that's about to happen soon. I think everything is good to go when it comes to Spider-Man. Like, they got that contract sorted out and everything else. I think he has three more movies, and not including the Avengers movies. I think the Avengers movies is like two Avengers movies,
Rasa Indomie
three
ayam
movies.
bawang. Memang boleh rasanya itu sama ini.
One, I hate that. I don't feel
So
like
the last
he
8 years have been
great.
great for Spider-Man in many departments, especially the games. But the biggest difference more than anything in the last 8 years has been the rise of the MCU Spider-Man. The MCU has risen to become the biggest franchise in Hollywood, and Spider-Man is just another part of that now. And since he came into the frame in 2016 with Civil War, Spider-Man has been integrated as a part of the universe, and the next installment of the Spider-Man franchise, MCU Spider-Man 4, will surely add to this story. As good as I think those films are, I understand that people like possibly you have many issues with them, mostly to do with Tony Stark and the over-reliance of tech throughout the films. And I'm not going to go into more detail on that because, let's be honest, there has been a fair share of YouTube videos that have covered this before. But in my opinion, there is one problem that triumphs the rest, and one problem that no one seems to really be talking about. And that's that Spider-Man works so much better without a cinematic universe. And I think this is the bigger problem and the bigger picture to all of MCU Spider-Man's problems. Spider-Man being a part of a cinematic universe and a larger frame of storytelling sounds great on the surface. In fact, many people said this was the best decision to ever happen to the MCU when Spider-Man first joined the universe. However, Spider-Man is a character that has worked for decades prior to the MCU and has proved that it doesn't need the spectacle of a large crossover for him to work on the big screen. And I'd even argue that this is the most dire and biggest underlying threat of the MCU Spider-Man films above anything else. Even though many people would say this is great, I think this is MCU Spider-Man's biggest flaw in the bigger picture. Most people blame the faults of MCU Spider-Man on Tony Stark, or the tech, or the quirky and youthful nature of Holland's performance, but I'd argue that it's a lot simpler and also a lot more complicated than that at the same time. And to unpack what I mean by that, I think the massive issue overall is the heavy reliance on a cinematic universe, and it does not work for the Spider-Man character. The MCU cannot cease to interfere with the Spider-Man story in some way or another, because if it didn't, then what would be the point of the character existing in the universe in the first place? What would be the point between that deal between Marvel and Sony? What, they're going to come to an agreement to put him in the MCU and then just not have the MCU influence things? That just doesn't make any sense. People blame Tony Stark for the problems of Spider-Man Homecoming and Far From Home, but would the film be any better if the film featured another MCU character? What purpose would Captain America, Thor, or anyone else have other than to upscale the film in the same way that the presence of Tony Stark did? And that's the issue that I'm talking about. It's not Tony Stark. Tony Stark isn't the problem himself. It's the MCU as a whole. Spider-Man should have never joined the MCU in the first place. It's all well and good to have all the other Marvel characters exist within the same universe because their stories, their lore, their villains, their side characters never go as deep as a character like Spider-Man. However, a character like Spider-Man almost has a cinematic universe within itself. There are so many villains and other heroes and other characters that are a part of that mythos that you could integrate into a larger Spider-Man-centered story. However, you're trying to take this character that is so deeply rooted in himself and put him in an already fleshed out cinematic universe with loads of other characters. At the end of the day, I think it was the deal between Marvel and Sony that is holding this character back and all the problems that everyone has with him. But Lewis, they could include other MCU characters in the Spider-Man films and still make them better, like Hawkeye or Daredevil. Yes, you are right, but I'm going to explain to you why this is also a problem. Yeah, some of the characters that I've only mentioned so far have been the big hitters of the MCU, like Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor, which obviously are a little harder to incorporate into a Spider-Man film than the likes of Daredevil and Hawkeye, etc. However, I still believe that if you try and include Daredevil and Hawkeye in a Spider-Man film, I still don't think it would work as well as you think it would. You see, this sort of thing has already happened. However, it hasn't happened with another MCU character, It's actually happened with a Spider-Man character. This happened with Mysterio in Spider-Man Far From Home. You see, Mysterio had no right to be in this story, and I'll explain why. One of the main issues I have with Far From Home specifically is the fact that they used this character as the villain when Scorpion was right there. In fact, Scorpion was narratively set up as the main villain for the sequel and never ended up getting used. Bearing in mind, Matt Gargan was a character that had his motive built off from the last film and would have actually been a character that would have been influenced by the hatred he had for Spider-Man. However, we ended up getting Mysterio instead, who had no affiliation to Spider-Man in the first place. Kind of like those other MCU characters that are appearing in these films. But why did Scorpion never get used for this film then, if he was clearly a better choice for the main villain? Well, it's simply because Far From Home had to sculpt itself around the events of the cinematic universe, and that is the deep underlying problem. Mysterio is more of an MCU character than he is a Spider-Man character in Spider-Man Far From Home. He acts more like an outsider in the cinematic universe coming into the Spider-Man film rather than he's a Spider-Man villain. Because Far From Home didn't have the likes of Captain America, Thor, Iron Man. It had Nick Fury and Maria Hill, for God's sake. Like, these characters have appeared in Spider-Man comics and it's worked before. However, this film was shaped so much in the vein of the cinematic universe that it really just kind of fell apart for me. Spider-Man is a character that thrives on his own style of
Alright, I'm gonna be right back. I gotta go do something real quick.